Hi, it's Katrina. What if electricity was discovered 2,000 years ago? What if ancient civilizations possessed technology and knowledge far beyond anything we give them credit for? Today, we are diving into the most mind-bending puzzle pieces from the past, ancient technological artifacts too advanced for their time. The Baghdad Battery. 2,000 years ago, someone was getting zapped. Long before Tesla was cranking out electric vehicles and iPhones were dying at 23%, the ancient world had its own version of a battery. It came in the form of a ceramic jar, some copper, an iron rod, and a whole lot of mystery. Discovered in 1936 near Baghdad, this odd little artifact has since ignited more debates than pineapple on pizza. For almost 100 years, this container has sparked our imagination and made us rethink what we know about the ancient world. Now known as the Baghdad Battery, it's been called everything from an ancient pain reliever to a religious shock device. It's considered by some to be evidence that 2,000 years ago, the Persians knew how to use electricity. And they may not have been the only ones. Electricity may have flowed from Baghdad to Cairo. Is this really a battery? Let's take a look. The artifact is a small ceramic jar with a rolled-up copper cylinder and an iron rod tucked inside that would have stuck out of the top with some bitumen sealant keeping everything in place. What was odd is that normally ceramic jars from thousands of years ago are pretty empty or just have some residue. But in this case, we have copper and iron together. Why? Wilhelm Koenig, the director of the National Museum of Iraq at the time, took one look and had an electrifying idea. This was a primitive battery. But how did it work? Koenig saw all the gold-plated silver objects from ancient Iraq and theorized that these devices could have been used for electroplating. When filled with an acidic electrolyte like vinegar or wine, it would have produced a small voltage, about 1 to 2 volts. But if you connected a few of them in a row, you could get a whopping 4.33 volts of electricity. Just enough to mildly buzz your fingers, but not enough to keep your fridge running. Remember the Mythbusters? Well, they proved that the Baghdad Battery works. They tested it using lemon juice and confirmed the vessel creates an electric charge. The question isn't whether it worked or not. The question is, what do you charge using a battery that can only produce 4 volts? What were the ancients doing with this power? I don't know, but the scientists do. Some have floated the idea that the battery was used for medical purposes, possibly early acupuncture with a gentle electrical charge. Energy healing was big back in the day. Bronze and iron needles found nearby add fuel to this theory. The device could have been for some unknown version of electrified needle therapy. I think my favorite theory is that the battery was used to zap people during rituals. They may have had a whole bunch of these batteries hooked up to a sacred idol made of metal. When someone touched the idol, they would get slightly electrocuted. But since they didn't know about batteries, they assumed the electric shock was from the power of a god. Neat little life hack, eh? Keep those religious zealots in line with some friendly zapping. Then there are the researchers who think the Baghdad Battery was nothing but a jar. Just a boring jar used to keep sacred scrolls rolled up in the copper tubes. Can you think of any other reasons to need electricity in 200 BC? Let me know in the comments. Ancient Babylonian math skills. If ancient humans could figure out electricity, of course they could figure out math. It was the Babylonians who are credited with becoming the first math whizzes. And now, for the first time, scientists are finding out just how brilliant the Babylonians really were when it came to crunching numbers. Archaeologists have officially been shook by what they are calling one of the most sophisticated mathematical artifacts ever. Found in the ruins of Babylon, once the New York City of the ancient world, a dusty rectangle of baked clay is rewriting the history of geometry faster than you can say right triangle. First, a little context. Babylon, located in what is now modern-day Iraq, was once glamorous, powerful, filled with invention, trade, art, and probably some epic bar tabs. At its peak, it had over 200,000 residents, making it possibly the first megacity in human history. Tucked among its ruins, researchers have found something far more thrilling than another broken pot or a statue's toe. They found a clay tablet that proves the Babylonians were math wizards thousands of years ahead of their time. Dr. Daniel Mansfield is an Australian researcher from the University of New South Wales. He got access to the tablet this year. Upon seeing the engravings, he recognized clear mathematical patterns. With a bit of study, he was able to bring them to life. The tablet, identified as Plimpton 322, contains a list of Pythagorean triples. These are sets of numbers that fit perfectly into the famous formula. Did your brain explode? Okay, just checking. I'm no math whiz, so I have to take the word of the experts that all of these numbers and formulae make sense. Those experts say that the tablet is proof of the Pythagorean theory being used by the Babylonians 1,000 years before Pythagoras was even born. Sorry, Greece, looks like you were late to the triangle party. That's how advanced the Babylonians were. But what were the Babylonians doing with all their math knowledge? You know, the usual, building ziggurats, trading across the world, completing their geometry homework. This discovery isn't just about triangles or ancient math geniuses. It's about how modern scientists have been underestimating ancient civilizations. Babylon wasn't just spitting out laws and building epic towers. They were also mapping land with the kind of mathematical finesse that makes modern surveyors weep into their CAD software. And now for a quick break because it's shout-out time. I want to give a big thank you to Team Yoga Force and Anth Wilkinson for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you guys. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out. 3,000-year-old wizard hats. What's better than a crown made of jewels? I'll tell you. The year was 1000 BC. The world was still figuring out how not to accidentally burn down the village with a torch. And somewhere in Europe, a group of mysterious king priests, or possibly ancient astronomer nerds with a flair for fashion, were crafting giant golden hats. Yeah, this next story is all about golden hats. These things are beyond weird. No feathers, no fur, no logos, no mesh. They look straight out of a Harry Potter Stargate crossover episode. Some even think they look like advanced technology. These bad boys are tall, pointy, and made entirely of gold. And you know what gold is good for? Conducting electricity. Wearing one of these things in a thunderstorm would be a surefire way to get 10 million volts straight to the brain. This whole saga began with a humble glint of metal poking out of the dirt in Germany. A worker, thinking it was trash, tossed it aside. Only when rain washed the mud off did someone go, I think you just threw away ancient treasure. Local treasure expert George Raschke swooped in, identified the fragments, and realized they were part of something extraordinary. He pieced the fragments together like the coolest Lego set in history. When he was done, he had a 3,000-year-old golden hat, later dubbed the Golden Hat of Schifferstadt. Not long after this amazing breakthrough, more golden hats popped up in France, Switzerland, and Germany, each covered in cryptic symbols that looked like an alien tried to leave us a message. To this day, the message, if indeed it is one, remains undeciphered. The symbols are mostly discs, circles, and wheels. While some think they might spell out a message, other scientists believe they are astronomical symbols. A lot of archaeologists think of these hats as wearable calendars. But instead of reminding you about that dentist's appointment you can't afford, the gold hats calculated solar and lunar cycles. According to researchers, the designs contain patterns tied to the Metonic cycle, a roughly 19-year-long lunar pattern identified by Greek astronomer Meton. But Meton identified this pattern 5 centuries after the hats were made. Again, we see proof that ancient people already possessed immense mathematical, engineering, and astronomical wisdom. All this knowledge existed in the world thousands of years before more modern scientists discovered them. Still following? Good, because it only gets weirder. One theory suggests the wearers of these majestic headpieces were priest kings, or, I know this sounds like a Marvel villain, Lords of Time. They were said to possess supernatural powers, or at least mad math skills, that let them predict the best times to sow, plant, and harvest. Another interpretation is that the hats mimicked the conical crowns worn by gods from the Near East and Mesopotamia, like El and Baal. Some have noted that the hats look similar to the headgear of Quetzalcoatl, the Aztec god. But that's impossible, right? The Aztecs had no contact with the Greeks. Or did they? Whatever the case is with these hats, they are weird, mysterious, and seemingly unsolvable. But they also might be the oldest legit wizard hats ever found. They look like they could have been worn by Gandalf's nerdy cousins who went to MIT instead of Hogwarts. How do you like that crossover? If you had a magic hat, what would you use it for? The ancient drive-thru you didn't know you needed. In ancient Majorca, a Roman trash pit coughed up a greasy secret. Not a lost scroll or a gladiator's gym sock, something even greasier. Something that if it were around today, there would be lineups around the block to get some. Archaeologists in Pollentia, a Roman outpost on the island of Majorca, dug up what might be history's first recorded chicken wing binge, except a little classier and a little more Roman. What they found was evidence of Roman fast food. I know a lot of people assume that fast food is a modern invention, but it's not. Quick meals have been around since the first guy's tummy grumbled and he started calling himself hangry. When it came to Roman fast food, you had a few options. Most popular of all were fried songbirds. Archaeologists found the remains of hundreds of these adorable little birdies, specifically song thrushes, the cute little birds you hear tweeting in the early morning spring. The Romans turned these birds into nuggets. I don't know if that counts as advanced technology or just advanced snacking. Either way, I'm in. Welcome to Taberna McRome. Would you like some olive oil with that? The pit in which these birds were found is behind something called a taberna, or a tavern, the Roman equivalent of your local fast food joint. Researchers led by Alejandro Valenzuela discovered 165 bones from song thrushes in the cesspit, but not full birds. No wings, no thighs, mostly skulls and weird little parts that nobody wants, unless you're a cat. Why is the pit filled with weird parts of the birds? Because this was probably where all the unwanted bits were dumped by workers at the tavern. Or it may have been where customers threw out the scraps. When it came to catching birds, the Romans had it all worked out. Thrushes migrated to Majorca in massive flocks, practically volunteering to be the daily special. Locals trapped them using sticky branches and pit traps and sold them to fast food joints, where they were flattened, pan-fried, and skewered for an easy grab-and-go meal. This was the ancient Roman version of buffalo wings and a beer. How would you like to try some out for yourself? The mind's secret portal. What if the portal to your consciousness is already inside your head? Tucked right in the center of your brain, like an internal Wi-Fi router you forgot you had, is the pineal gland. Putting aside the fact pineal is probably the funniest word you'll hear all day today, this itty-bitty pinecone-shaped blob has been the MVP of spiritual speculation for thousands of years. Scientists call it an endocrine gland. Mystics call it the third eye. Depending on which ancient civilization you ask, it was either the seat of the soul, a consciousness keycard, or your built-in astral telescope. Ancient people understood that the pineal gland has power, and some of them even learned how to master its power, something that today seems to have been entirely lost. Humans might not even have the ability to tap into their pineal glands any longer. The first documented mention of this mystery gland can be traced back to a Greek doctor and philosopher named Galen. Galen's colleagues believed that the pineal gland regulated the flow of something they called psychic pneuma. It was a substance they dreamed up that worked kind of like the hydraulic fluid of the human soul. Galen wasn't buying it. He believed the pineal gland regulated blood flow like some glorified blood valve. The point is that even in ancient Greece, people were arguing over the importance of this tiny gland. Then came René Descartes, the French philosopher who called the pineal gland the principal seat of the soul. Descartes understood that it isn't connected to the other things on your head, like your eyes and ears. Descartes believed it was the portal where the immaterial soul controlled the body like a psychic gamer using a joystick. He basically thought that everything you say, do, and think are controlled by your soul, which is using your pineal gland as a control console. Meanwhile, over in India, Hindu deities were all about the third eye. Shiva, god of destruction and cosmic rebirth, rocks a third eye in the middle of his forehead. And if you look closely at his glorious locks of hair, you'll notice they're shaped like a pine cone. And the pine cone is the representation of the pineal gland. Why do you think the Pope has a pine cone on his Pope staff? It represents the third eye. Ever notice the giant pine cone statue at the Vatican between the two bronze peacocks? Yep, another symbol of the pineal gland. The church is flush with them. Now let's shift to ancient Egypt, where the Eye of Horus wasn't just a cool eyeliner look. It was a secret anatomical diagram hiding in plain sight. Side by side with a cross-section of your brain, the Eye of Horus matches the pineal gland's location and shape, right down to its fancy swirl, which is a little unbelievable considering you need an MRI machine to see these details. How did the Egyptians know about the pineal gland's location and shape without access to medical technology? In ancient Sumer, the Anunnaki gods were immortalized in statues and reliefs, often shown holding pine cones. The Greek god Dionysus and his Roman copy Bacchus carried staffs, also topped with pine cones. In Cambodia's Angkor Wat, there are massive statues of pine cones. Are you starting to see the connection? In cultures from the deserts of Egypt to the jungles of Southeast Asia, humans were obsessed with the pine cone and the pineal gland. Did you know that the shape of a normal pine cone follows the Fibonacci sequence? This thing inside our heads doesn't even seem natural. If you've ever been able to open your third eye, and if it's allowed you to glimpse forbidden knowledge, be sure to tell me about it in the comments. I'm dying to know. The Walls of Constantinople. They don't build them like they used to, do they? Ever notice how ancient walls are still standing proudly after thousands of years, while modern infrastructure crumbles like it was put together with toothpicks? Did the ancient people simply put more effort into their work, or did they have better techniques than us? There's no greater example of ancient stonework than the Walls of Constantinople. I say walls, but I'm really talking about one huge wall that once encircled the fabled city. It was so strong that it could take a cannon blast without sweating. The wall outlasted empires and shrugged off earthquakes. Today, it's known as the Theodosian Walls. Their origin story takes us to the 4th century AD. Emperor Constantine the Great had the difficult choice of picking a location for his shiny new capital. He considered Troy, glanced at Rome, and finally landed at Byzantium, a Greek port town perched perfectly between Europe and Asia like a real estate agent's dream. 6 years later, Constantinople was born. It came complete with palaces, forums, and walls designed to withstand a siege from the armies of hell, or, in the context of historical events, to withstand the formidable armies of Islam. Let me break down the setup of this epic fortification. There was the Megateikos, the innermost wall. It was 20 feet thick and about 45 feet tall. It was also reinforced with up to 11 bands of brick, like seismic duct tape, and it was lined with 96 polygonal towers, which acted as sniper nests for medieval archers. Exoteikos was the outer wall, complete with 62 sniper towers. That's a lot. Beyond that was the moat, about 30 feet deep and wide enough for the Olympics, but you couldn't swim in it because it was never filled with water. Spikes instead. If that wasn't enough to deter invaders, there was the Parateikion. It's what you call the middle terrace between the walls, used to funnel attackers into easy kill zones. It's like a tactical kill box, but ancient and terrifying. Once attackers started moving through the walls, they were forced into these narrow kill boxes and slaughtered. In 1999, a 7.4 magnitude earthquake hit Istanbul. It was utterly devastating for the city. And do you know what fell? The modern buildings toppled like when you play Jenga on a moving boat. But do you know what didn't fall? That's right, Constantinople's original walls, built 1,600 years ago. They didn't even move. Why is an ancient wall sturdier than our modern buildings? But even for all its strength, the wall didn't keep the city safe forever. In 1453, Sultan Mehmet II brought out the big guns, literally. He rolled in a cannon so massive it needed a team of oxen to haul the thing around. This was the Iron Man suit of medieval artillery. And even that beast couldn't break the walls outright. It took weeks of relentless pounding, a fleet carried over land to bypass sea defenses, and a perfectly timed sneak attack through a forgotten side gate. Even then, the Ottomans barely managed to take the city after multiple failed assaults. The walls didn't fall. They were circumvented. Constantinople wasn't beaten, it was backstabbed by a maintenance oversight. Its walls are still undefeated to this very day. Can you think of any other ancient construct this impressive? What do you think? Can the Great Wall of China stand up to the walls of Constantinople? How the ancients told time. What time is it? Sounds simple now, but it wasn't always. Ever wondered how people told the time before calendars and phones? How did people keep track of birthdays and important meetings? Timekeeping started by looking up. The sun, moon, stars, and 5 visible planets were the original timekeepers, spinning out schedules for sleeping, sailing, sewing, and surviving. Ancient civilizations aligned buildings with the stars, like Egyptian temples and Minoan palaces. Their structures were designed to catch the sunrise like it was the golden hour every day. You don't need an alarm clock when the sun beams in through your front window and falls on your face every morning. I bet for some of you that sounds like the perfect way to rise every day. And I bet for others that sounds like a total nightmare, you vampires. In Mesopotamia and the Near East, they turned constellations into calendars. The Greeks built star maps, and in Egypt there is an actual papyrus from 300 BC that linked festival schedules to astronomy. Almost all time was tracked by the stars. Found in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece, the Antikythera mechanism is like if a Rolex and a spaceship computer had a baby in the 1st century BC. With dozens of bronze gears, it could allegedly predict eclipses, planetary movements, and moon phases. People still debate how it was even possible to build such a complex computer 2,000 years ago. In fact, experts still debate everything about this mechanism. Some say the Greeks may have walked around with these mini timekeepers in their togas like the first smartphones. Others think only one was built, likely by some unknown genius who was epochs ahead of his time. For those who couldn't afford their own pocket computer, they could rely on sundials. Sundials came in hot around 1600 BC. By the Hellenistic period, they were as common as cats in ancient Egypt. Romans even had portable sundials like pocket watches, but stone and sun-powered. Roman towns were practically littered with these things. 35 sundials have been found in Pompeii alone. Emperor Trajan even cracked a sundial joke, telling someone their nose was so big it could cast time-telling shadows. That's some elite-level mockery right there. Who knew Trajan had a sense of humor? In Greece, they started using something called the clepsydra to track time, also known as the water clock. They had these set up in court so that you couldn't give long-winded speeches. The water clock would cut you off after 6 minutes, making days in court shorter for everyone. Maybe they should install a clepsydra at the Oscars. You know what I'm talking about. From Babylon to Athens, Rome to Egypt, timekeeping wasn't just practical. It was spiritual, political, and occasionally mind-bending. Control time, and you control agriculture, religion, labor, and law. It was the ultimate ancient power tool. Building bridges the Mesopotamian way. This defies gravity and common sense. What do you get when you combine a 6,000-year-old building technique with a material that cracks if you look at it wrong? You get the glass bridge, the Penn Monument for Hope, a shimmering 30-foot feet of fragile ambition that looks like it belongs in a sci-fi movie, but it walks and talks like it was designed by a Sumerian in sandals. This architectural marvel, currently wowing visitors at the Corning Museum of Glass, owes its strength not to modern steel or reinforced concrete, but to Mesopotamian geometry so old it predates written history. Built by Masoud Akbarzadeh, a professor of architecture at the University of Pennsylvania, this bridge doesn't hold itself up with bolts, screws, or anything metal at all. Instead, the bridge relies on funicular design, a technique Mesopotamians were using back when the wheel was a new invention. This funicular design hinges on a critical principle. It's all about compression, not tension. Push, don't pull. Squeeze, don't stretch. Imagine stacking Jenga pieces into a gentle arc that gets stronger and stronger the more you press down. Individually, each of the bridge's hollow glass units is delicate enough to make you wince, but arranged together in a precise interlocking pattern, they form a structure so strong it can easily support people walking across it without cracking. The team pulled off this engineering miracle by applying Sumerian U-arc principles invented at the dawn of civilization, only they added a bit of modern flair by updating the principles with laser-precise digital modeling. The bridge only works if the math and the geometry are perfect, which you know they will be when you're copying the Sumerians. Masoud himself said the bridge can't work if the measurements are off by even one tiny hair. Then the whole thing turns into an expensive game of dominoes. At its core, this bridge is proof that ancient doesn't mean primitive. The Mesopotamians might not have had advanced software, but they knew how to make arches that lasted millennia. Would you trust a glass bridge built with Mesopotamian principles, or do you still prefer modern methods when it comes to not falling into an abyss? Let me know in the comments, and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. The Lady of Elche. In 1897, in a quiet Spanish estate, a 14-year-old boy did what archaeologists spent decades hoping to do. He casually flipped over a rock and changed Spanish history forever. Beneath that rock was the hauntingly beautiful stone bust of a woman, dripping in ancient regality and mystery. Known today as the Lady of Elche, she has been a national icon and a spiritual enigma. She has also been, according to conspiracy theorists, proof that the ancients were just as into advanced tech as we are. Those Princess Leia-style curls? Some say those are actually headphones. Let's talk about the hair. There are massive coils on either side of her head. While officially called rodetes and thought to be a unique hairdo, some people have said they look suspiciously like headphones. Or if not headphones, then some sort of communication device, audio receiver, or even energy transmitter. You know, the stuff you definitely weren't supposed to have lying around in 400 BC, unless your civilization had a tech support line to the cosmos. The woman herself is just as big a part of this mystery as her headgear. Carved from limestone, she wears layered necklaces, has tassels dangling over her shoulders, and stares as if in a spiritual trance. She also has a huge cone-shaped headdress, which people think is hiding a long alien skull. Her face still held traces of red, white, and blue paint when discovered, suggesting that she once popped in full color. But it's her headdress that launches 1,000 conspiracy theories. It runs across her forehead with marble-shaped bumps, possibly symbolic, possibly decorative, and possibly the ancient version of a neural interface. Some people think she is Tanit, the Carthaginian goddess of the heavens. Others say she represents an Atlantean priestess, an ambassador of a long-lost super-civilization with advanced tech and extremely strong neck muscles. Who do you think she is? And what do you believe this stuff on her head is? Headphones, hair, or an alien helmet? The epic search for the Manna machine. Pretend for a second that you're in Bible times. You're one of the Israelites who has just escaped an Egyptian tyrant. You're following some guy named Moses who has you trekking across a scorching desert, your sandals worn thinner than overpriced sandwich meats. Sounds terrible, doesn't it? And everyone in your group is hangry enough to start a mutiny. Hot, you're hungry, there's nothing to eat, and Moses just won't shut up about being careful with the Ark of the Covenant. Thankfully, God provided a snack to the Israelites as they teetered on the brink of death in the desert. God sent down manna from the heavens, a strange biblical snack that saved the Israelites and sparked 3,000 years of food-based head-scratching. Was it bread? Was it bug goo? Was it lichen falling from the sky like snowflakes? Or did God provide the Israelites with a supreme piece of high-tech gadgetry that made food from thin air? Grab your mortar and pestle, my friends, because we are diving into history's tastiest enigma. So what is manna? The book of Exodus tells us that manna showed up one morning on the desert floor looking like frosty breadcrumbs. The Bible describes manna as small, round, and white like coriander seeds. It tasted like wafers dipped in honey, which sounds pretty delicious. The Bible also says that this magical food fell daily, melted in the sun if you slept in past the crack of dawn, and turned to slush if you hoarded it. The Israelites couldn't stuff manna in their pockets because by lunch, all they'd have were pockets full of maggots. And nobody wants pockets full of maggots. All right, so what was this stuff? Botanist Harold and Alma Moldenke proposed manna was a variety of different desert lichens. They said that some algae from the genus Nostoc are known to grow across the desert floor of the Sinai whenever there's enough dew on the ground. The Israelites could have woken in the morning to find manna, aka algae, growing in the morning dew. Harold and Alma also said Lecanora esculenta and a few other lichen species are known to shrivel up and travel like flakes of granola on the wind, even seeming to rain down from the heavens. Heavenly algae sounds a lot tastier than what Israeli entomologist Shimon Bodenheimer suggests. Shimon boldly declared that manna might be insect poop, a sort of nutritious secretion left by sap-sucking bugs on tamarisk trees. The goo they produce dries into pearl-like drops that are surprisingly sweet to eat. Even today, locals in the Middle East eat this stuff, and it's used in Iranian medicine to treat conditions like neonatal jaundice. Insect poo, as gross as it sounds, has some medicinal benefits, many of which scientists probably don't even know about yet. There's one last theory that I need to discuss, and it's the big one. It's been whispered for years that the manna which fed the Israelites came from a machine, some sort of incredibly advanced piece of equipment that was able to produce nutritious food flakes, kind of like fish food from thin air. While no device has ever been found, it is a neat idea. It might even be connected to the Ark of the Covenant, which some think may have been a nuclear battery. A battery to power lost technology, like the manna machine. At the end of the day, it's all just speculation. Judaism isn't the only religion fascinated by manna. In Christianity, Jesus compared himself to manna and called it the bread from heaven that nourishes bodies and eternal souls. In Islam, the Prophet Muhammad likened desert truffles to manna in a hadith, basically saying this weird fungus is kind of like God's vending machine. Whatever it was, manna supposedly kept a nation alive for 40 years as they wandered through the desert. Just don't ask Google Earth how long it takes to cross the desert on foot, or you might accidentally discredit the entire book of Exodus. What do you think manna is, or was, or is it even real? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching! Remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!